Today we are going to talk about a topic that's close to my heart, and I'm not sure if it's all going to fit into one video. I guess this would be the starting point. Hi, my name's Danny. I'm an avid modern board gamer. Today I'm going to be talking about whether all Euros are the same. Now, if you've been following my channel for a long time, you'll know that medium weight Euros are like my favorite type of game to play. Obviously have my favorite family games, my favorite party games. I used to be really heavily into like dungeon crawlers and RPGs, but more recently I've just really been interested in different puzzles that Euros present. So a lot of the games that do arrive at my place and ones that I order or explore are Euros. And the ones that I often tend to suggest on a Sunday when I'm playing board games with my hubby is a Euro. And so I'll play things like Barcelona, Windmill Valley, Arborea, Skyrise, you name it, Batoku. A lot of these Euro-centric games are ones that just really appeal to me because it always presents with me an interesting puzzle or an interesting challenge. And so the other day we were playing Windmill Valley, and at the end of the game I was like, what did you think of this game? And he said, you know what? I really liked it more than Barcelona. It probably wasn't a game that really worked with his brain, but he could appreciate how well designed it was. He really, really enjoyed it. But then he said, look, aren't all these Euros similar? You go through the motions of starting out with a base level of actions. Your aim is to get victory points, get resources, turn those resources into another resource, which gets you a higher resource, which then scores you points around the track. You then get cards with endgame scoring conditions and ongoing abilities that you connect together to create an engine. And he basically was like kind of saying that a lot of Euro games are just kind of re-implementations of the mechanics of each other. So a lot of Euros tend to be have lots of tracks that you kind of ascend and scale up and level up. That kind of represents your progression in the game. And so he was saying, like, you know, the track in Teotihuacan is just like a progression track, and it's similar to the 3 temple tracks in Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar. And you know, this worker placement game is quite similar to that worker placement game because you place the worker down, you get the resources. How is that different from both of the games? And the abilities that you get in this game in like viticulture, how is it different from the abilities, say, you get in a game like Windmill Valley? Obviously, the way you do things in these different Euros, and this was my point, is different. So the way you go about ascending the tracks, playing the combos, for example, Lost Ruins of Arnak is a really good example of where you're building the deck and then you're using the deck to do things and gain abilities and acquire other artifacts to send the tech track and things like that. And I think with like games like Dune Imperium, where there's a little bit more like intrigue and the use of the cards to kind of indicate where you can place your workers out on the main game board, I feel like there's a lot of games that kind of sidestep from the core base of a victory point track, ability cards, and converting resources, which kind of ties into more of the traditional Euro games like Agricola, Caverna, and a lot of those early Uwe Rosenberg games as well. And so it really did get me thinking about how much crossover is there mechanically between Euros. I know thematically, Euros have a really clear point of difference. You know, a game like Terracotta Army has a very clearly distinct theme than Windmill Valley. Themes itself feel different when you play it, and the mechanics that are attached to those themes help to accentuate that theme in most cases. Some cases, some games like Coimbra or Toledo, the games are a bit more abstract and more mechanically based. But most Euros that are thematic in their sense tend to be expressed through the mechanics. And so I was thinking, you know what? This might be an interesting deep dive and a discussion to have just with you, the viewers, but also just in my own brain about like, maybe the 100 or 200 games or midweight Euros I own are all just the same sort of game, but just looked at from different angles or different points of view. Is card drafting in Sushi Go any different from the card drafting in Planted? You know, I just think you're still picking a card, you're still building a tableau, and you're still trying to get as many points. What warrants both of those games in my collection? And my hubby did say, you know what, you do play Planted a whole lot more than Sushi Go or Sushi Go Party, and we've owned Sushi Go and Sushi Go Party for like years. And Planted has seen way more plays than either of those two games combined. And so it just really creates some interesting points where like, at first I was like quite offended. I was like, how dare you think that all the games that I'm buying are identical in some way? Sure, they have similarities, but I mean like, all games are gonna have some form of board, cards, tokens, otherwise there's not really a game there. And it really got me thinking about the other things that I enjoy in life that could be seen as really similar. Like for example, I'm a big fan of The Legend of Zelda. And I'm thinking, well, if I enjoyed Breath of the Wild, there are a lot of similarities in Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom. However, I still think Tears of the Kingdom is a far superior game. Now, whether they're the same game, sure, they have a lot of familiar and similar mechanics and similar ways things work, but Tears of the Kingdom, at first I thought was like an extension of Breath of the Wild, but actually it really feels such a beautiful game on its own that I would probably never go back to Breath of the Wild just because Tears of the Kingdom's scope was so large. And it also made me think, well, I'm a fan of Super Mario. Literally every Super Mario game is basically doing the same mechanics, getting to the end of the level, getting the flag, and then beating Bowser. Yet, there are so many different versions of them. Are they the same game? They are the same world and the same IP. They have the same similar mechanics. I would almost describe Super Mario and Legend of Zelda as almost its like own genre of games because there are so many of them. The genre of the theme of that game is something that really propels it forward. And so I was thinking, well, are Euros the same thing? Is it like pop music where like music chord progressions get recycled throughout time by different artists, but just presented with a different type of beat or different type of instrument? And I was like scouring through my collection and just looking for things. And I was like, you know what? There are two categories I feel that belong in this kind of comparative analysis. And the first category is that they're your stock standard Euro games that give you the points, the resources, and the customizability of a few little tiles here and there. And then there are ones that just really try and push the envelope differently. And I guess in board game design space, because there's like 5,000, I think, board games released a year, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's only so much design space you can spread into in order to be innovative, different, and unique. And so I'm like, what games really push that envelope, that kind of filter up above the crowd and just be like, you know what? Here I am. I'm this amazing Euro game that uses other things that people don't talk about a lot. And so a game that really jumped off my shelf was Tiny Towns. Yes, it's got resource collection. Yes, you're going to be scoring points. But the way you do it in this sort of Euro game is a little bit different than a lot of other Euros. And then there's the fact that one person at the beginning of each round is going to announce the resource that everyone is going to collect. And the way you squeeze that resource into your little grid is up to you. It's a puzzle that you'll have to solve, yet someone else has suggested what you need to collect. And here, the combination of different building cards and monument cards really adds for variability about how you approach the puzzle. And so Tiny Towns really made me think that there is no other game that is like this in my game collection, because it really approaches this resource conversion, building ability aspect from a really different point of view, which for me felt like it stood out. Santa Monica is a game where you are drafting cards, but then you're building them out into a tableau, except your tableau is going to be basically 2 rows of cards, one representing the beach and one representing the boardwalk of Santa Monica. And then you've got to move all your people across the boardwalk into different locations. And I thought, you know what, this game uses very familiar mechanics of picking cards, but however, in this version of the game, you've got 2 rows of cards, and as you pick from the bottom cards, the top cards slide down, which I thought was an ingenious mechanic that I've seen in only a very small other games. Pyramidal, probably another one that uses that trickle down mechanic of showing you what's coming, and then you can only take what's at the bottom. And the idea of geographically moving all your people to match with the theme of the game, I thought was really, really ingenious. I don't know if I agree at this point that all Euros are the same. In fact, I definitely don't agree with my hubby about this topic. And with a further deep dive into my collection, I was thinking, wow, what games in my collection, Euro games, are truly unique? And so this game, I was super excited about this game when it first came out. Ark Nova, it's like a zoo building game where you're playing cards with tags and things like that. But this game came with a lot of criticism early on. And it's not because of its 3-hour playing time, but the fact that the game kind of was a meld of 5 different other games. You had these current like conservation and money track that when they cross over, trigger the end of the game. That came from a game called Rajas of the Ganges. You've got these tags that you play on cards that allow you to play other cards and gain little effects, similar to terraforming Mars. You've got this little game map where you're building hexes out and placing like your enclosures out in this kind of like puzzle-y effect with like little tiles, which a lot of other games do, like Castles of Burgundy. This game was a conglomeration of about 5 other games all encompassed into one. It's got aspects of worker placement. You've got to place your cubes out. You get little resources. You get money. But one thing that really drew me to this game that I thought was quite innovative was the use of the 5-card action system. That cards would be out in front of you, and whichever slot they were in, that's the strength that you'd be able to use that card for. And then when you use that card, you moved it down to the lower end, and all the cards would kind of slide up. And this is something I had not seen before. So in some ways, sometimes Euros have to be the perfect storm or the perfect mix, where you have all these familiar mechanics and you just only have to inject the right theme or 1 or 2 little twists on the mechanics that people haven't seen before to really elevate above the rest. And Ark Nova is a super popular game. Games like Ark Nova, when I'm pushing that buy button or I'm looking whether is this the right game to fit in my collection, I think, first of all, do I like the theme? Second of all, what are the mechanics and how do they relate to what you actually do and achieve in the game? And thirdly, is this something that I already own? And if I can kind of tick through those 3 boxes, I'll see that this probably would be a game for me. And I do try not to get games that I already have. And so this can be quite challenging because often nowadays there's so many nature themed games, you can't possibly have them all. Or maybe you can actually. Whether those games do that same theme differently is also another interesting thought point. Because more and more games exist already out there, it's harder to kind of like break the scope of what people are already into and what they're familiar with. I guess with a lot of like RPG or story-driven games, you can kind of change the story and present a fresh story that players might be able to engage with and repackage it differently. You know, a lot of mystery games kind of lean that way. But then you've got like this new trend that's been happening for about 5 or 6 years now, where you get a game like Imperial Settlers, top game, absolutely loved it when it came out, and then only for another game, Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, to be announced, And not only that, Imperial Settlers, Miners has also been announced. So you get all these derivative games that kind of stem off from the base game, or spin-off games that kind of explore the mechanics again, but in a slightly new way. Then you got games like Great Western Trail, which was a fantastic game, but then ended up spawning a trilogy of games like Great Western Trail Argentina, and obviously the best one of the bunch, New Zealand. And so it made me really, really reflect. Obviously, there's not a space for all of these games and all the different versions in my place because, you know, I actually need to sleep somewhere. But it did make me think about whether the design space is filled up and whether maybe Euros, maybe there is an element of truth to what my hubby was saying, that Euros are all very similar. They're all just different versions of each other. This is a version 1.2, this is version 1.3. Which of the 3 different versions do you want? You take your pick. Then they come out with a duo version, then a solo version, then a cooperative version, then a competitive version, then a team version, a party version, a roll and write version. When a new game comes, it's like, have I seen it? I recently got a game of Phil Walker Harding's game, Cities, which looks absolutely amazing. Not sure I agree about the 3D components, but in general, amazing game about drafting little tiles, plot tiles, and then putting houses on them, and getting little phone cards which have objectives on them. And so it's basically a resource tile placement drafting game. And then as you're like putting everything together, you're trying to satisfy certain outcomes. And I was like, I think I might have seen this game before. I think I might have seen it somewhere before. And then I went into my collection. About 5 years ago, I bought this game called Expand City, which basically is the same thing. You play tiles, you put buildings on the tiles, there are contracts and particular configurations you want to vie for, and you fulfill them and you get points. I think they kind of like the same theme, the same kind of like look, same kind of approach, and I think maybe the art of this box really grabbed me more than anything else. I think there are games that are very, very similar, and more recently I've noticed a new trend with some of the Euros I've been playing. Don't think it applies to all Euros, but the idea that, you know, creating chaining combos is something that you really want to strive for. And there's been about 3 or 4 Euro games I played recently where basically the main goal is to just squeeze out as many combos. So if you play games like the White Castle or Barcelona or even Windmill Valley, the idea of bouncing off those combos is basically what you're doing in all 3 games. And that's how you're going to win. The more you can get more combos and synergize the actions more, and that's how you win. I guess the way you do it in both games is very different. In all Euro games, you're constantly upgrading your abilities, upgrading your endgame scoring. When I play the game, I don't think about that in that abstract mechanical level. Playing the game, I'm more immersed in its theme, and I've got this little warrior training, I've got this little gardener, or this little action gives me 2 coins. Like I enjoy that little tiny little positive hit from it. But I don't really, in my brain, think that they're the same game. I think my hubby's a lot more analytical, and he does like thinking about the programming side of things. So like a game like Cities, for him, he would not care about the theme. In fact, he's more of a thinker, and I'm a bit more of the themer. And so for him, he doesn't see all the colorful aspects of the game. He sees more how it works and the inner workings, whereas I like to see a lot more of the dressings of a game, and that'll appeal to me more. There's a lot of moving components and a lot of little pieces, and you can see me smiling because I know in my head that it's true that I love all the little finicky bits. All Euros similar? For me, I would agree to an extent, but also strongly disagree to another extent. And let me quickly explain. What I do agree on is the fact that the core skeleton of a Euro game is very similar. Doesn't matter which Euro game you pick up. It's always victory points, resources, some tiles, maybe some cards. To that extent, I do agree. And there's a lot of similarities that cross over between different Euro games, and it doesn't matter the theme, whether it's about, you know, ancient Greece or whether it's about, you know, the Mayans. The core mechanics, I feel, in a lot of Euros can be different. Yes, a track may be expressed as a wheel in one game, but also expressed as a spiral in another game. They're still tracks. You might upgrade your abilities by going from left to right on 4 different tracks with 4 different markers, or you upgrade your abilities by tucking cards in. You're still upgrading abilities. To that extent, I do feel that that is a big, strong similarity that really supports my hubby's statement that he made very casually, by the way. It's obviously just a point of discussion. But where I think Euro games become different, obviously the theme of the game is a point of difference, but I think the journey that you take to solving a puzzle or solving the puzzle is different. Like, there are thousands of different 1000 jigsaw puzzles that are out there that you can buy. Jigsaw puzzles that show you pictures of Disney characters, jigsaw puzzles that show you pictures of, you know, national parks. They're still jigsaw puzzles. You still have to put them together and you're still creating a picture. And I feel like Euro games are similar. I think the theme is different, but the way you put the picture together and the order that you sequence everything together is the bit that's different for each game. And I do gravitate towards games that do explore one familiar mechanic in a different way. I know, like with viticulture, I love the idea of having the grande worker. With Arborea, I like how the tracks slide. Windmill Valley, I love upgrading the rotating segments. In Woodcraft, I like the idea that the action wheel moves you into the next quadrant, and that kind of synergizes what bonuses you can get, and that the dice actually function as like little trees. You can chop the dice up and split them into small dice. I really love little innovative touches like that. And there are a lot of games in my collection that I would describe as midweight Euros that are not like any other Euro games I have. Like when Great Western Trail first came out, that felt really unique to me because the rondel mechanism of that game, where you have these base buildings that you kind of cycle, you've got this deck where you're thinning out the best cattle and cashing in for money, and then you do it again, but as you play the game, more and more property gets placed out. It really felt fresh because the way you got the points, the way you upgraded, and the way you progressed in the game felt different. And so for me, like, Euro games do come with an added feeling of how satisfying is it when I play it. And that does really factor in whether I enjoy the game or not. I do feel to an extent that my personal interest in how the mechanics are expressed gets to a point where I'm like, this has to be a game in my collection. Now, that's been a pretty long discussion. I might have gone off on a few tangents here in this video. I've limited the editing in this video because it is a Talking Sanctuary video. It is a talking point, and you know what? I'd love to hear your thoughts about whether you think a lot of Euros are similar, whether they're just rehashing the same things over again, or whether Euros are truly becoming more and more innovative and unique from each other. I'd love to hear your comments in the comment section below. If you can suggest any really truly unique Euro games that stand out from the crowd, then please definitely leave that in the comment section. I'd love to read them and start a conversation with you. Now, if you found this Talking Sanctuary video really helpful, please consider subscribing and liking my channel. I'd love to present more of these Talking Sanctuary videos, so let me know what you think of this series. Should I bring this series back and talk about lots of other different topics? And it's just a really great way to engage with you. And you know, if you really want to support me, please head over to my Patreon page and support me over there and buy me a coffee a month. That would really, really be helpful. I hope your next board game is an amazing one. I hope to see you in the next Board Game Sanctuary video. This is Danny signing out. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.